This podcast episode is brought to you by OWC, Whisper Room, Spectra 1964, PreSonus Studio One, and Jay-Z microphones. So get ready to rock.
I spend so much time doing things that are terrible when I mix. The person who was actually an inspiration to me for that is Chad Blake, because I remember watching an interview with him and he just said, to get to the good sound, I do like 20 things that sound terrible and just keep building on it. And maybe it starts getting closer and then, but you had to try a lot of things. It's going to be boring if you don't try things.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. If you feel like the fast pace of computer tech has made your studio Mac obsolete, then think again. OWC is your personal studio tech for memory and speed upgrades, DIY installs, and used Macs perfect for recording and mixing. Why ditch your existing computer when you can take your studio far into the future with the Mac you've already got? Learn how to supercharge your studio and find out how awesome your Mac can be at OWC.com so that you can focus on making great music. If you're sick of bothering the neighbors when you're trying to record your music or ruining your recordings with outside noises, but you're not ready to spend a fortune on permanent studio construction yet, then consider getting a Whisper Room ISO booth for your studio. Whisper Room offers an instant solution for a comfortable, quiet, ventilated, portable ISO booth with easy line of sight for recording vocals, guitar amps, or even drums. Get 10% off the 4x4 or 4x6 booth when you mention Recording Studio Rockstars at whisperroom.com. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Anthony Gravino, an independent music maker based in Chicago, Illinois. He's worked with a wide variety of artists across multiple genres as a producer, recording engineer, mixing engineer, mastering engineer, and musician. Anthony has been on the show before for episode 156 when we talked about how he makes records in the studio, capturing great sounds for indie rock, jazz, and other genres. His private studio, known as The Drake, is equipped with a large collection of classic recording equipment and instruments with a focus on comfort, flexibility, and high-quality sound. Anthony loves to create compelling recordings with exceptional sonics and is always striving to serve the song. We had the pleasure of hosting a mix clinic together, me and Anthony, back in 2019 at Shirk Studios, owned by Steven Shirk in Chicago, Illinois. And we had rock stars like yourself traveling from all over the country to join us for the weekend, which was a totally packed control room. I think we had about 20 students in there, and it was super, super fun to do. So we just taught mixing for a full day clinic in the studio. And so I thought today we just have Anthony back on the show to talk more in depth about mixing, because mixing is a lot of fun and we love it. So today we're going to dig into Anthony's mixing process, both through the Sphere console at Shirk or at his studio, or mixing in the box with Pro Tools. I guess we'll find out which way we're going to learn from today. So please welcome Anthony Gravino to Recording Studio Rockstars. Anthony, you ready to rock, dude?
I'm ready, Lidge.
Dude, are you ready to mix rock?
I'm always ready to mix. I'm actually in the middle of a mixing project right now, so this is a apropos time to talk about it.
And apropos is such a good word too. So apropos of that, tell us a little bit more about the project you're mixing right now.
Right now, I'm mixing yet another Hood Smoke album that I have co-produced and recorded. And so this is, I think, the 5th album I've done with them. And so it's all their records are a little different. The one before this was a little more acoustic-y, folky, with some rock in there too. This one's a little more this one's a little funkier, and it's got some like Los Lobos.
Oh man.
Kind of even just like funky Sly kind of stuff. It's a Bill Withersy kind of vibe. It's a little more like that.
Like Colossal Head, Los Lobos, that kind of vibe?
Yeah, there's a couple tracks on there in particular that are definitely channeling that kind of laid back, soupy vibe.
Nice, man. So this episode's coming out a little bit later on, but when I was at NAMM in 2020, I had a nice sit-down breakfast with Chad Blake and had a great conversation. And I didn't get a chance to talk to him about Los Lobos. Actually, mostly we talked about the home studio battle that I've been taking care of here in Nashville. But that record itself just blew me away. I remember when a buddy of mine introduced me to it, and I was really knocked out by the creativity surrounding that stuff.
You're talking about Colossal Head, yeah?
Yeah. It's one of those mind-blowing tracks or records.
It just comes on and you're just immediately, something special is happening.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a great combination of cool sonics, but also really great choices of performance stuff that they kept. It's kind of loose but cool, it's not too tight.
Yeah, exactly. And all the choices for instrumentation, sound, parts, they're all bold choices.
Yeah, but they all work. It's not like awkwardly bold.
It's right.
Appropriately bold.
Bold as in not like you stepped on somebody else, but like you're, strongly holding up the other parts in the song.
Yes, exactly.
So on the last interview I did with you, we really got your backstory, so we don't need to go into that so much today. But tell us about, your studio that you're sitting in right now. Tell us about how you're approaching a mix.
So my studio is a hybrid kind of a situation. I have a small API. It's called API the Box. It's a little console with 20 inputs that I can use on the mix.
I know it well.
Yeah, and then I have a bunch of outboard gear. I've got some, old Uri compressors and some Pultec and some old Neve modules and, Manley Varimu, a bunch of that, and an EMT 140. So that's kind of the analog stuff. And I use the console to sort of interface all that stuff into the mix. So some of the stuff is getting summed out of Pro Tools. And then some of the stuff is coming out on its own individual tracks on the console, but it all comes through the console. And then on this particular mix, I am fortunate to be able to have the artist have the budget to mix to tape. So then the console feeds into my it's an MCI Mara machine to 1/4-inch 2-track. So I'm printing the mixes onto tape, and at the end of the process, we'll master the mixes from the analog reels.
Oh, that's sweet. So where would you go for a mastering process like that? Do you have somebody local that you love to work with where you actually just walk the tapes over, or do you have to, send the tapes through FedEx to get somewhere? How does something like that work?
A lot of the time I do it here, I just do it with the artist here or not. And sometimes, we'll have somebody else come in who's just kind of a fresh set of ears. And I tend to, I know a lot of guys don't like to master their own stuff, but I do. It's just, for me, it's just like I've got this vision from the beginning of how I want it to sound. And, unless I get to a point where I think, oh, I'm not doing this any justice right now, then I'm good with doing it. So most of the time it's here. Some of my stuff gets mastered elsewhere, but usually they don't have tape decks. So then those projects usually don't get done.
Right.
The way that I'm doing this one now.
Yeah. So do you take the tape reels off of the tape machine, walk them around the studio, and then put them back on the tape machine so you sort of feel like you're going to visit Anthony, the mastering engineer?
Well, usually they go on the shelf for about, a few weeks or a month or 2 months.
Yeah, they have to marinate, right?
Yeah, and then they come back out. And they've never been played. So, when I go to master, they're still in really good shape.
What do we need to know about tape sitting on shelves? Is there anything about the sound quality that changes or evolves or any of that stuff? Or is it all just, are we getting into mystery land when we start talking about that stuff?
Well, certainly there are ways that you need to store it in order to, preserve it over a long period of time in terms of mostly temperature and humidity.
Yeah.
If it gets too humid, it'll get sticky, and then you're going to lose a lot of it when you play it.
So if you live in a swamp,
you need a dehumidifier. You need a dry room. I don't live in a swamp, so I live in a place where right now I'm having to humidify the air. So
what do we know about that? Is drier better? I mean, if you live in Arizona and it's dry all the time, is that actually perfect? Or do you then have to get a humidifier and put moisture back in the room? Do you know?
Well, I think there's a tolerance level on either side of it where it can become bad for it. I'm not sure about the extreme dryness. I've never heard anybody complaining about that, but I know that you're not supposed to go to any extremes in temperature or humidity with it because it can just compromise some of the physical material on there.
Yeah. Well, speaking of humidity, I actually recently bought humidifiers for my house and for the studio, having learned that my guitar setups were more likely to hold, the intonation and the tuning of the guitars, and the guitars themselves would last longer, probably also the piano, if I kept the studio at like 45% to 50% humidity all year round.
Yeah, that's very important. In fact, if I look to my left here, I can see my little humidity gauge in the other room where my guitars and my Wurlitzer and my piano sort of are. I do the same thing. I mean, it gets really dry here when you run the heat a lot in the winter. So I've got a couple little humidifiers. I try to keep it. They say like the bottom is 40%. Like don't go below 40.
Yeah.
I think 45 to 50 is kind of the ideal range.
Well, I think it's worth talking about because when you never have thought about it, it's, when I first discovered this stuff, it's all kind of fascinating to me. But if my humidifier runs out and I'm gone for days or something, I can come in here and it can be down to 35%. And I'm like, oh man. So here's what I learned about it. You can pick up a humidifier on Amazon, for example, and you just, you want to get an evaporative humidifier.
Yes. Don't get one of those ultrasonic ones because they leave dust all over everything.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yes.
All right.
There are certain ultrasonic ones where you will just get this layer of film.
That doesn't sound like fun.
It's not cool. I learned the hard way. I bought one and then, a few days later, I'm like, what is all over this? And then I figured it out.
Yeah. So then I was a little worried about having to fill it. I was like, oh, it's going to be so hard to do. And then it's actually become really easy. It's no more challenging than making coffee at the beginning of the day. You just take the little water thing and, fill it up. Usually you have to fill it up once, then fill it up again, and it fills up the reservoir, and then you're good for the whole day. And you can just turn it off if you're about to record, so it's no biggie.
Yeah, and most of them are pretty quiet. I mean, they're not, unless you're recording like a bee fart or something, they're not going to probably get in the way of a take.
Wait, did you say a bee fart?
Yeah.
Nice, man. Well, I mean, it could have been a bee fart, like Captain Beefheart.
Yeah, that's true. I've never recorded a bee fart, but I always thought, I'd need real quiet gear to record that bee fart, like a high gain mic. And that's like the ultimate in like, what's the quietest thing?
What's the quietest thing? Come to think of it, I don't think I ever heard, of all people to make a joke about the word beefheart sounding like beef fart, it would have been Captain Beefheart himself. And I don't think I ever heard him make that reference.
I have not heard that either. Now that you mention it, that's surprising.
So what about any of this stuff we're talking about has to do with mixing? That's what I want to know.
No, I mean, well, if you have a humidified room, then your instruments are more in tune. So when you go to mix, it's easier when the instruments are in tune.
What about that? Do you know anything about, or have you heard anything about what we hear out of the speakers changing with the humidity in our studios?
That's a good question. I've read stuff where guys would say that, you can get the low end better at low altitudes, where it's like humid in like New Orleans. Apparently the air there, literally the air can, I don't know the science to really speak.
That wasn't just the Chamber of Commerce and Tourism that was pushing that?
Well, it was like Lanois, I think, might have said that or something at one point. And then there are people who have conversely said, like, trying to sing, like, for example, in the Rocky Mountains at Caribou Studio, which was this studio that was at, very high elevation. It was very hard to sing up there because
no oxygen.
Not as much oxygen. Yeah, exactly.
I could see that. I mean, if there's less air in the air.
Yeah, there's less
sound for
the sound waves to travel on, right? So that's why they're saying like down at the lower altitudes, the low end had more air to move through or something.
Yeah, that makes some sense. That's fascinating. Well, so yeah, yet another level of needing to get your mixes right across multiple playbacks.
Oh God, that's too deep for me.
You want the critical details from your microphone to get through to your recording, and the Spectra 1964 101 amplifier provides just that, with unequaled headroom, low noise, and a linear output irrespective of transient audio peaks. Used by Tom Dowd, Muscle Shoals, Stax Studios, and The Record Plant on records by ZZ Top, Aerosmith, Bruce Springsteen, and John Lennon, Spectra 1964 brings that same incredible sound to your studio with the new STX 600 mic pre with built-in comp limiter. Start making classic records again at Spectra1964.com. If you want a digital audio workstation that will give life to your music, from sketching a new idea to composing, editing, mixing, and mastering a finished record, then you want Studio One from PreSonus. Studio One is easy to use with intuitive drag-and-drop simplicity, making it great for beginners yet flexible and powerful for experienced producers. Whether creating beats, recording a band, or composing a blockbuster film soundtrack, you will find everything you need to create your masterpiece. Download your free version of Studio One Prime and get started now at PreSonus, wherever sound takes you. So let's talk about the box. So actually, I'm really recently fascinated with the box from API, and it is a mixing console. In fact, I did a video with them about it when I was at NAMM 2020, and it is this wonderful console that has 8 faders. Now, you may have an older one too, but there were 8 faders on the left side, and then there were 16 smaller faders on the right side, or faders plus pan pot or return pots, I think. I don't want to misdescribe the buttons, but
it's kind of like a monitor section. It's got, there's 16 faders. Everyone has a pan. Everyone has a solo and a mute, and everyone has 4 aux sends. And there's this balance to inserts on every channel too. So you can patch stuff in and use the inserts to sort of A/B, outboard gear. Mine only has the 4 channels, but yeah, it has 4 channels that have mic preamps and 500 slots. I've got 4 550A EQs. So it's simple. It sounds really good. It has excellent sonics. The compressor that's built into it is really cool. I use it on the stereo bus quite a bit. The monitor section is excellent. It's got 4 2-track returns. It's got a Q section. It does a lot of simple routing stuff that you need in a studio like mine. I need to be able to feed my headphone box. Mm-hmm. It's got a nice headphone amp built into it with 2 outputs. It's just got all this really nice functionality built into it. Mm-hmm. And like I said, the sonics are really good. I mean, before I had this, I had a Neve 54 series, which is like one of their sort of broadcast consoles.
Yeah.
Late 70s, early 80s, which was a very nice sounding console. But when I moved to this, I definitely noticed that the image and just like the stereo field was deeper. And it didn't have quite as much color on the top end. It was a little more clear.
Those are nice features. And those are qualities that can show up in the final mix, even if I'm, listening to this, streaming this later on an iPhone across the world. Or are those features that just show up in your speakers in the control room while you're working?
Well, I think no matter what you use for your mixing platform, the sound of it is going to show up everywhere the product goes. Yeah. Because everything has a sound, right? Mm-hmm. Some more subtle than others. I find that, going through this thing gives me the combination of a slightly improved summing sound, as well as just all this functionality to be able to interface my outboard gear without having to use hardware inserts and a DAW, and just quick tactile kind of things that it gives me that are really important for me, because I like to work fast on a mix. I don't like to sit there and push the mouse around all day. I like to stand up and move around and push faders and turn knobs. That's part of the process for me. Gets me more engaged. So that's kind of the interface for me is that, I have my monitor section. I've got my main tracks on faders on that thing, and it's all right in front of me.
So main tracks. So if you've got, a voice, drums, bass, guitars, and a voice, do you try and bring up the drums on a pair of faders, or there might be like a kick, a snare, and then a stereo pair, and then the bass is on one fader, the two guitars are on two faders, and the lead vocal is on a single fader, and then everything else is on a stereo pair or something like that. How do we think about interfacing in a hybrid setup like that?
That's pretty close. I can tell you what I've got right now because I have a mix literally sitting here right in front of me. So
sure.
Left to right on the 4 channels that have the EQs, the 550 EQs, I've got electric guitar left, electric guitar right, bass, and lead vocal. And then on the summing side, 1 and 2 is drums, stereo pair, and then 3 is a parallel compressed drum, kick and snare, going through a Valley People Dynamite and a
nice.
GML EQ. And that's just to give it some tail and some attitude. Channel 4 is the Tambourine. Channel 5 I'm not using. Channel 6, what was that? I don't have them labeled right now. I can't remember what channel 6 was. 7 and 8 are acoustic guitars.
6 is the magic. It's the whole reason why the mix sounds amazing, and we'll never know.
I'll have to pull the session up. 9 and 10 is the piano. And 13 is the backing vocal. And then 15 and 16 are everything else. So like my spring reverb is coming out of there. All the effects, all the delays that I've printed into the session come out of there. Some ancillary things. This particular multi-track isn't super dense, so I can get most things out there if I send the drums down and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a lot of stuff coming out of that summed stereo pair. But then there's also another thing called program sum in, which is just a 2-track input straight to the stereo bus. And then I've got my plate returns on that. So
okay, all right. So that
like
you can blend in more stuff.
Yeah, so I just send to the plate from Pro Tools, but then it returns onto this program sum in input straight into the bus.
Well, it's interesting because like when you spell it out like that, it's like, oh, look, it all fits right there. And then I imagine, of course, every project is different. If you had a 24-track rock band, maybe that's a little different, although drums, bass, guitars, vocal, backgrounds, and some effects, that's pretty consistent. Why would you put a tambourine on an individual channel? Is that because it lets you, because you can use the sends directly to a verb from there?
That's one reason. Also, I wanted to put it through the Dynamite, the other channel of the Dynamite. So,
nice.
So I used that, and I also send 1 on my console right now is set up just to send to a spring reverb. So if I want to send something to the spring, it has to be on a channel on the console. And
right. Okay.
It's not always like that, but on a mix like this, that's how I do it. Just to have it really quick, I can just flip it in. I don't have to like make a send and do a bunch of stuff. So, that's how I have it set up right now. So generally, sorry to interrupt. Generally, those elements that I just said will be the ones that get on faders, and everything else, if it's just super dense on top of that, will come up just, it'll be summed. If there's like 20 keyboard tracks, that's all going to be done in the box because I don't have enough real estate for all that stuff.
We don't have to get 20 consoles for 20 keyboard tracks.
I like the size. I like the sort of limitation of it. It gets too much, and to have, 40 or 50 tracks out on the console, it's just not reasonable a lot of times with the time restraints and stuff, and just,
brain restraints.
That too. Yeah. Sometimes, a lot of times, I've got those kind of elements pretty well worked out in the box as far as their balance and tone. And those aren't the things that I'm looking to necessarily sweeten up a lot. Like I definitely want to make the bass feel really good. It gets its own fader and some outboard gear. I definitely want the vocal to really shine. Okay, it's going to get, the 1176 and the Pultec and maybe a Neve module on the mix to, give it some oomph.
Yeah.
There's certain elements that I always need to shine. The drums need to shine. I'm going to give them some place to use some analog gear on.
I'm going to describe those as things that are sort of sonically featured as well. So when you think about all these tracks and a big thing, but then you also think about, big thing, that's not very specifically, it's a big production. but then you also think about what makes a really great production, and you begin to understand that it's like the really great productions always have a simplicity of what it is that's featured in a mix and what I'm really paying attention to in a moment. And then I think that begins to simplify it, where you're like, oh, well, these are the things that should get, the special treatment or the special faders.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how I look at it. And for me, again, the knowing that it's going to have that level of simplicity is just a good starting point.
Yeah. Now, another thing that I have noticed, and I'd love for you to either corroborate this or just tell me I'm full of shit. But I do remember pulling up a tambourine on a console and, at some point, and being struck by how easy it was to turn that fader way down and still hear the tambourine clearly, even though it was really low in the mix, compared to trying to do the same thing with a digital fader in the computer. Have you ever, you think that I'm just making that up, or do you think that there might be something you've noticed around that?
Well, I definitely think that the way that a nice analog fader feels is pretty different from the way that any digital controller I've ever used feels, just in the way it reacts. So I don't think that's crazy. I think that the digital faders get really weird down below, like minus 20, 25. They just start to become, I don't know, less accurate or less palpable.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like an analog fader, it feels just like the track is just really linear all the way down,
Yeah.
and all the way up. Now that obviously that's if it's a nice console.
Right.
But yeah, I feel the difference. I definitely, I hear you on the tambourine. I usually record tambourines like very low in level because I know that if the fader's at 0, it doesn't have to be recorded very high,
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I know that can be tricky, a little bit tricky if you're recording at very low level to tape. And
I wouldn't. Now that tape, a totally different story.
Yeah.
I'd be hitting the tape much harder with the tambourine and then turning it down later. But
yeah. Any thoughts? This topic of tambourines has actually come up when I had Bill Cheney on the podcast. We're talking about the Spectra 1964 stuff and how it handles transients, and how a tambourine has challenging transients when you record it, where you can get that, if you turn your pre-up too much, you really begin to hear it where it sounds like it's like a knocking sound and it sounds weird, the tambourine hit. Is there anything around that topic that's worth discussing about recording and then including in the mix, the correct sound of a tambourine?
Yeah. The way that I think about the tambourine is that it's the thing that my cat is the most afraid of. And the reason, that and keys, though that's another very complicated sound. And actually, a long time ago, somebody told me, if you ever want to test a microphone, jingle keys or tambourine jingles in front of it.
Right. Bill mentioned that too.
With it turned up, and just like the best gear will not distort. You won't hear it distort, like a mic preamp or a mic, but I think that the situation is that so cats can hear up to 40K or something like that.
Whoa.
And essentially
they can actually hear a bee fart.
Yeah, that's why they're hearing. They're good hunters in the wild. They need to hear that rustling grass. But like a tambourine or a cymbal or keys, they have, I think that their fundamental is literally 30K. So the loudest part of those things we don't even hear, but my cat does. And that's why he runs for the hills every time I even move a tambourine in the room. And so there's a lot of information going on in that sort of out of our human spectrum of hearing that I think is hard for, signal processors to deal with, quite honestly. So my approach to that is to use a Coles 4038 or a dark ribbon mic on them, because then you don't it takes that off before it gets to anything else down the line. That gets attenuated.
Yeah.
And I don't find that information super useful.
High frequencies be damned.
Just in tambourines, it's just geez, there's so much of it already. I'm looking to counter that with something that mellows it out a little bit,
Yeah.
I mean, you think about you're shaking a tambourine in front of a mic, think about what that sounds like right next to your ear, it's that doesn't sound good. So yeah, I'm a dark Coles tambourine kind of guy. That's my first approach, unless it just doesn't sound right. But usually I like that.
Yeah, I don't really understand why it is that a ribbon sounds good on the tambourine. It's not like an EQ thing with frequency response. It's more like maybe the I don't know if the ribbon doesn't move with the high frequencies, if it's just physically the ribbon can't move as much, or if it's something about the filter, the natural filter of the magnetic pickup in it. But I agree, the Coles 4038 is always my favorite choice for tambourines. And yeah, I just like the way it sounds a lot better.
Yeah, every once in a while, I go, let me try something else, and I'll try, whatever, KM86 or 414 or whatever is sitting there, and I'm always like, nope, that doesn't sound as good to me. That would take a lot more manipulation for me to fit it into a track. Tambourine is one thing that's like, if it's isolated, it's pretty easy to manipulate. You can usually make a tambourine sit in a track with some EQ and compression.
Yeah.
If
compression
you have to.
helps a lot, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was using I just kind of discovered this dynamite is really cool on the tambourine because you can slow down the release and it just like sucks it in so that there's just like no dynamic range in it. It's just holding it in this one place the whole time. But if you're trying to put it in a sort of a dense section, it just sits it right in there so nice, or it doesn't poke out, but it's still present the whole time,
Nice. The dynamite comes from Valley people, right? Or Valley Audio or whatever.
Yeah,
Which I think was originally Allison Research.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they made the key packs or the K packs.
And I've got a rack of them behind me, and I love using
nice.
them. They're funky sounding, and that's kind of what I dig about them.
I've never used one.
Yeah, they make Gates and the Gain Brain.
Oh, the Gain Brain. Yeah, I've seen those in studios.
Yeah, and then mine have these little medallions on them of Allison Research, and it's like a picture of the lady. And I believe it was the founder's like ex-wife or something like that. And I might be making this story up, but eventually like they start showing up, and like some of mine have little mustaches drawn on them and stuff like that. And maybe that was like after things didn't go so well. I don't know. Good story.
Nice.
Probably totally bullshit. Are you sick of microphones that make your music sound harsh and brittle? The new Amethyst mic by Jay-Z Microphones brings you a rich, warm tone with perfect detail using the golden capsule technology. Resulting from 30 years of microphone design, the Amethyst is hand-built using carefully selected parts with Class A discrete circuitry, extremely low self-noise, and an advanced shock mount to make sure your recordings sound awesome. This is my voice on the Amethyst right now. Use the limited time coupon Rockstars to get 50% off the Amethyst mic at jzmic.com. All right, so one of the things you mentioned too was using the dynamite on the parallel drum compression, but you also have the stereo drums coming up through a pair of faders and then the parallel on a sidechain. So do you send everything to the parallel, or are you selectively sending drum shells and just using the aux sends from Pro Tools, for example?
Yeah, I'm not sending everything to the parallel. I'm probably only sending the kick drum and the snare drum, sometimes the toms, usually not anything else, because what I'm doing with the dynamite really, really brings up the cymbals sometimes in a problematic way. So I don't want any of that. I want as little of that as possible. And sometimes I'll even make it separate, just duplicate the track and gate it,
Yep.
like gate the kick and gate the snare on another track, and that's what gets sent to it. I didn't have to do that in this case, but yeah, so it goes into that, which does this kind of pummeling, pumping, kind of thickening thing to it. And then it's almost a little too much. It sounds really cool, but it kind of fattens up the bottom of it all too much. Mm-hmm. And so then I go into an EQ and like carve all that stuff out and make it have more sort of attack.
Okay, cool. So, if we're experimenting with this stuff, and we start thinking we're not getting it right, don't quit. You may just need to sculpt it a little further.
Oh, man. I mean, I spend so much time doing things that are terrible when I mix, I mean, just making things sound awful, just, what's this going to do? What's that going to do? I think, the person who was actually an inspiration to me for that is Chad Blake, because I remember watching or maybe reading an interview with him, and he just said, to get to the good sound, I do like 20 things that sound terrible and just keep building on it. And maybe it starts getting closer and then, but you had to try a lot of things. I mean, it's going to be boring if you don't try things, you don't experiment.
What about that process of getting to the good sound? So when you try 20 things that sound bad, it can be a little bit mind-numbing too. How do you feel like when you've got to the good thing? Is it like a light bulb goes off, or is it subtler than that, where you're like, no, I'm feeling it now?
It's funny. I was just literally thinking about this a couple days ago on this mixing project now, and I was probably maybe like 70 or 80% through a mix, and I just thought to myself, how do I know when I'm done? And I was thinking, trying to just put it together in my own head. And I thought it's subtle in that all of a sudden things just come together. And all of a sudden I feel this cohesiveness in everything. Mm-hmm. And it might not be perfect yet. It might not be right where I want it. But I know that I have this general gel in the tracks. There's a moment, I don't really know how to describe it. I just will feel it like, oh, okay, here. Yeah. Now I'm close. Now maybe I'm not going to be as bold for a little while.
Right.
Maybe I'm going to just try to find some little problem things and make them a little better. Or, is there a little performance thing? Now that I'm hearing it more clearly, sometimes you get into a mix and you clear things up and all of a sudden you hear stuff that you didn't hear before as clearly, performance stuff or noise or things like that. So at that point, I'll get into kind of like, oh, can I tweak this or that? Or, is there something noisy that I missed? And trying to do that. And then, but once I have that feeling of like, oh, this has cohesion, then, it's pretty close. And usually if I have that feeling and I send the mix to the client, there's not much to change.
Yeah.
It's the ones where I'm feeling, okay, I don't know. Like I don't know how much further I can push this, but on this day, but I'm not sure I love it, but maybe I should get some feedback from the client. Those are inevitably the ones where it's like, there's a lot of stuff to change.
Right. And it's funny how a client can come back to you with like 10 things that they don't like about it when it was really one thing that was just totally off.
Yeah, I think it's our job to kind of distill that in those moments and get to that quick, because I don't like getting too far down in the weeds,
Yeah.
Mix revision 10 is not something that I look forward to.
Well, like vocals, I mean, you get the funniest things where you're like, maybe somebody says like, the vocals sound too compressed to me. I think they're just too compressed. And then you just simply turn them up much louder and it's like, oh, that's so much better.
Yeah. And we have to remember that a lot of people don't know exactly how to use the language that we use on the technical side. They, sort of slang kind of, and people don't really have a concept of what they're saying sometimes. You have to kind of understand that. Well, most of the people I work with are not engineers. Some of them are, but most of them are not.
Yeah. But they'll use the same language because they've heard you use it or they've heard other people use it. And
Right. Without having a clear grasp of what the concept actually is, which, that's kind of, people do that all the time in all different walks of life.
What about starting out in a mix? Anything that we should talk about as far as how you approach the beginning of a mix?
I like to get everything sort of set up in advance, like the routing and most of the outboard gear that I'll want to use. I kind of know, I have some chains that are pretty kind of, okay, I'm probably going to use that on this. So I try to get that stuff set up and get the session all laid out so that when I sit down and push play, I don't have to think with my left brain for a while.
Right.
I can just get into this, the sound and the feeling. And so that's kind of how I start. I'm not like, I don't have a process of like, I start with this instrument and I just kind of, I'm a picker, I just go in and start just like whatever catches me in that moment. I try to do it and I spend it like an hour or two like that. Just, one thing at a time.
But routing is, that's definitely a very tangible beginning because it gives you something to do. You start breaking it up.
And it's something I know I have to do, and it's something I don't want to interrupt my process creatively to do because it's sort of the other side of things. It just gets you out of that mindset.
Yeah, and I guess the nice thing about the setup process, it does give us a chance to start to get to know the individual tracks as well, just because you begin to hear, maybe you're routing the drums and you're just hearing what the drums sound like for a moment, or especially if it's new music that you didn't record yourself and you're learning it.
Yeah, it's quite different when I get a mix in from someone else. I usually I'll listen to a little bit of the rough mix, maybe not all of it, but I just want to have, listen to it, get an idea.
Yeah.
See if I think it's good or not. Like, oh, do I have to change this a lot, or is this pretty close?
Right.
That's the thing. I think it's important to resist the urge to change things that don't need to be changed. And sometimes that's how it is. But sometimes, there's a lot of things that need to get changed. So
yeah. And how do you know whether you should change them or not change them? Do you find that you've learned to just sort of trust your gut and then feel it out, or do you find that it's beneficial to always start with a conversation with the client and get a feel from them regarding that? Or is that like asking them what kind of compression they like when they don't even know how to describe compression?
I ask them for broad strokes, comments beforehand sometimes, just give me a general idea of something, something like on this one, for example, that I'm mixing now, the songwriter, singer, bass player in the band at the beginning just said, just in general, I don't want my vocals to be too loud or too big. He wanted them to sound a little smaller in the scheme of it, And I think it's because he's listening to, maybe some older records where it's like that, and it's funky because of that, Yeah,
and you said this is a little bit funkier record too?
Yeah. It's not like so lush. It's more like funky and scrappy. So I thought that was a great, suggestion. I hadn't really thought about it that way going in, but he said that and I was like, oh, yeah, duh. That's a great idea.
That's cool.
So I went with that, and this has probably been the least amount of mix changes. I'm through. I've done 5 now, and I mean it's just been like such minor little things. The process has gone very smoothly.
So. Now these are guys you worked with for a long time.
Yeah,
so you guys have a real dialogue.
Totally, yes. I mean it's very comfortable, and at this point in our working relationship, we get the multi-track to where we're pretty happy with it before we get into mixing. So. The mixing just makes everything sparkle more, and there's not really a lot of surprises there.
I'll tell you what, before we take a break here, why don't you talk about that topic a little bit? Talk about mixing before you're mixing in the production stage. What are some of the decisions that you are aware of making that make sure that this is going to be great when you get to the mix?
I'm always trying to manage the low end in the recording phase. That seems to be the trick for me. The low end and the dynamics. So, making sure that there are a lot of elements in the mix, that elements that don't need bottom end don't have it when I record them.
So what's an example?
Guitars, electric guitars don't need, I cut 150 hertz and below on electric guitars all the time.
This might be an EQ move in the recording stage on the way into the computer?
Yeah, like a high pass filter on a mic. I've got I got these new microphone preamps that have really nice high pass filters on them. Okay. And I'll just cut guitars through that, because then there's maybe something after it, and I don't want all that low end, eating up my headroom. Or tambourine, anything that's up there, trumpet, you don't need 80 hertz and below on a trumpet, So, or backing vocals is another big one. And when you're stacking vocals, I like to really make the stack sound good when I'm recording it, So sometimes that means I'm going to cut pretty aggressively in the low end, where if you just heard that voice by itself, it might sound kind of weird, but it sits right in there and it doesn't take up too much space and get in the way of the lead vocal.
Let's talk about that, because now that I'm thinking about it, I totally get it. And I remember being struck by the fact, I'm like, really? I can cut my BVs in this mix all the way up to 250 or even 500 hertz, and it could still potentially sound cool. But I've always done that on the back end of things, and I've never done that in the recording process. And now that I think about it, when I'm doing stacking vocals, I do get very thick sounding rough mixes of stuff where I'm still digging it, but the song's no longer kind of necessarily representing where we're hopefully headed with the final mix of this. So what is your process for cutting the vocals? Again, the Neve low cut on the vocals themselves, and are there times when you totally go for super thin as you're part of, stacking highs and lows and doing like a 4-part? Maybe there's 4 different vocal notes, and maybe there's 4 takes of every single note.
Yeah. So, well, my vocal chain is pretty much the same now for the last couple of years. Once I got these things, they're called past mic pre-EQs. They're this guy, Steve Butterworth. He's an ex-Neve employee, and he builds these channel strips that are basically like a 31105 or a 1081 channel strip. Mm-hmm. And it's got the most amazing high-pass filter in it. I mean, and the first thing that I said to him after I got him, he asked me, "Oh, what do you think? What do you like? What do you not like?" I was like, this high-pass filter is the best I've ever heard. It cuts lows without affecting the highs at all. Because, when you use some high-pass filters, it'll start to make the high frequency get harsh, but these are just amazing. And they're basically, they're old Neve parts. They're original Neve transformers and amp cards. And so I love the way they sound, and I love the way that high. So I'm pretty confident with that thing. You know what I mean? Where it's like, I know that, and I know it's not going to mess up anything above it if I use it. Whereas in the past, I've had equipment where I didn't have the same level of confidence in the high pass filter. I wouldn't track with it as much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But a really great EQ, when you learn it, it's like, oh, I know what this thing does, and I know that it'll be cool. So I get pretty aggressive. I usually, like with lead vocals, I'll usually track with just like the 47 hertz in there, just for any real low rumble that might happen, or bump the mic stand or whatever. Backing vocals, I'll usually start at there's an 82 hertz click on there. That's a good, starting point. Sometimes 150, sometimes I think it's 270. I can't see it from here. But yeah, and then sometimes I'll use the low pass filter too. If I want to sit the backing vocal more behind the lead vocal, I'll, go up to like 18 or 12 and just take a little of the top off of it, which will remove some of the articulation from it. If you're having like, little things popping out like T's and S's, if you just like remove some of the articulation, it'll go away. And then you can just like judge the performance a little better in the moment if you're hearing that on it, And then also the other advantage of EQing before on the way in is that if there's a compressor after the mic preamp, it's not going to react to all that low frequency information because you took it away. So the compressors tend to overreact less when you go into them with less low end, because a lot of times low end is what triggers them, especially like an 1176. So yeah, that's kind of my philosophy on that. And I'm just I like to build on things that are just like as finished as possible.
Yeah, no, I love working with that way too. And we'll come back and maybe talk more about that stuff here in a moment. What was the name of the mic pre again that you really loved?
It's called a Past. He hasn't made them for a while, but I'm trying to talk him in to start making them again because he still has the components to make them.
Nice. Right,
yeah, cool. And I mean, literally, they're gorgeous. Everything about them is wonderful.
Fantastic.
And I'm trying to talk him into making like, not full channel where it's just, 2 or 4 mic pre boxes with these basically like real 1081s in them, and they're really great.
Cool. Well, let's take a break for just a moment. Rockstars will be back for the jam session here with Anthony. Reminder that there's links to stuff we're talking about in the show notes. Just click through. There's a video playlist where you can go listen to a bunch of Anthony's great sounding records. And we'll see you guys in just a minute for the jam session. Cheers. Do you really want the neighbors banging on the ceiling when you're trying to rehearse or record your music? Do outside noises and computer fans get into your studio mic and ruin your recordings? You could book a pro studio to record every time, but that would add up quickly, and doing permanent construction to soundproof your studio could easily cost up to $100,000. And you can't take that with you when you eventually move the studio. Don't you wish there was an easy solution right now? Whisper Room ISO Booths offers a simple way to install a comfortable, quiet, ventilated ISO booth in your studio with easy line of sight for recording vocals or even drums in a variety of sizes. For 30 years, Whisper Room has been solving studio isolation needs with ISO booths that are shippable, portable, and can be assembled in an afternoon. Now you can get pro vocal recordings right in your home studio, practice whenever you want, and start using real guitar amps again. Get 10% off the 4x4 or 4x6 booth when you mention Recording Studio Rockstars at whisperroom.com. If you're using a Mac in your recording studio and you're tired of feeling like the studio setup you worked so hard to create is becoming obsolete too quickly, then Otherworld Computing is the solution for you. OWC can help keep your existing Mac and studio current and relevant so that you can make great music. Whether you need to upgrade your RAM, install an SSD, add more connectivity, or simply find a great used Mac, you can get the most mileage out of your studio with OWC. Offering a vast library of DIY install videos, 24/7 friendly support, and free shipping in the US on most items over $49, there's no need to get frustrated when you can achieve the speed to create and the capacity to dream at OWC.com. Hey Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Anthony Gravino, joining us from Chicago, Illinois. We're going to dig into some more mixing stuff. We'll start out here talking about the process of mixing before mixing with controlling the low end on your recording as well. So Anthony, you ready to jam, dude?
Yes, I am.
Jam some mixes. Tell us more about this process of making smart choices in the recording stage. What are some things that really help as far as getting the drums and the bass right, for example?
So the drums and the bass, it's going to vary for different genres of music. If it's electric bass or if it's acoustic bass or if it's dynamic jazz or if it's, less dynamic rock. I'm always, there's kind of that like, well, which one's lower than the other one? Kind of put one below and one above.
Right.
Some people think about it like that. I don't really consciously think about it like that. I'm always trying to empower the player as much as possible when it comes in the recording phase, when it comes to altering the sound with things like drums and bass, because bass, so much of it is in the player's hands. And sometimes they're not really aware of some of the things that they're doing and how it's affecting the recording.
You mean in a negative way or in a positive way or both?
Well, usually negative, just like certain things on a bass, like if you're doing a DI bass, sometimes things that might sound good live will just be really pokey and weird and artificial sounding. And so I'm always trying to, talk to the player first about what's coming from their instrument and how that can be the first line of defense against it. With bass, usually if I don't do a lot of EQ recording unless it's going to be additive. So usually that means like, 2K or 3K or trying to get it to have more articulation.
Yeah.
I struggle to get as much articulation out of bass as I want a lot of the time.
I know that feeling. And I guess there's the EQ aspect can help. It can get a little frustrating because you start feeling like you're just screwing up the bass sound.
It's a fine line.
And then I remember like the discovery of like, a pick. Actually using a pick instead of fingers can do pretty amazing things.
Yeah. Then there's another example of how I would say, hey, why don't we try a pick on this song? And with drums, it's a lot about tuning. One thing I've been doing with the drums for a while now, and I kind of just expanded it. I've been tracking the snare through a Pultec EQ, which I really, really like.
Okay.
Because it just does some really magical things to the snare drum high end. You can boost it a lot at 10K.
Yeah, so it's bringing out the presence of that close mic.
Yeah, and it just, I don't know, it puts air and space around it somehow in a really cool way. And then I've been in the last couple of sessions I decided, well, I've got these Lang EQs, these old PEQ2 Langs.
Right.
And I was like, well, I hadn't always been using them when I was tracking drums. I thought, let's put those on the toms and see how, a little top end boost on the tom sound. Because I use 414s on the toms, which are a little dark and woolly. And I really liked it. A little 15K lift just kind of opened up the attack, and that was really nice. So those are, and then I usually have a mic out in front of the kit. It's usually a ribbon mic. And I'll tend to, I'll have a parametric EQ on that, and usually a compressor. And I try to just get that sounding like a really nice balance of the whole kit, with a little bit of smack on it.
What's the mic that's out in front of the kick?
Usually it's a Coles 4038.
Oh, right. And that's got a ton of low end. And a reminder, Rockstars, you got to watch out, because if the wind is blowing out of the sound hole on the kick, it'll destroy a Coles.
Yeah. I don't. It's not that close. It's more up. It's higher. It's kind of pointing in between the space where the floor tom, kick drum, snare drum, and rack tom are. There's that like little hole in there. They kind of point it right at that. And sometimes I have a little trouble where it picks up a little too much of the ride cymbal. That can be kind of an issue. But but basically what I do is I'll have the drummer just play a beat. I'll solo that mic. And I try to make that mic, I try to EQ that mic kind of aggressively usually to make it sound like a really solid picture of the kit with just one mic that's getting a little bit of compression to give it some smack, but not over compressed. And I'm EQing out any of the weird stuff in my room or that's coming off the drums, and I'm maybe adding a little bit, but more usually subtracting from that mic.
Yeah, cool.
Some weird low mid-range stuff, and just scooping it out a little bit. And so then there's that mic, and then I put a mic out in my hallway, which is a stairwell. It's like a 3-story wooden stairwell, so it's got a lot of reverberation. Kind of woody reverberation. And I put a mic out there, usually a U87, and that I also EQ. I usually cut a lot of low end from that because for whatever reason the kick drum tends to really get it's the right amount of distance for the low end to really build up.
Yeah.
And so I'll cut some subs and usually cut some highs and maybe some wonky mid stuff out of that too. Usually not much additive EQ on that either.
And does that one get compressed?
A little bit, yeah. Usually, sometimes I've got this SSL clone, or sometimes I use my Neve 83065 compressor for that.
Well, it's too bad that you don't have any nice gear in your studio.
I'm fortunate in that regard. It's been a lifelong passion of trying to collect the things that I feel like make my job easier and more fun and make the results sound better. And I've gone through a lot of stuff to get what I've got now, and bought and sold many things that I didn't necessarily think worked with my workflow, but now I'm pretty settled at this point.
Because many of our listeners will be thinking, oh, it'd be nice to have a Neve this, a Neve that. But what I've got is a digital workstation and plugins. Let's talk about that aspect of things. I guess talk about the things that seem to work really well in the plugins for you, and maybe also talk about where you've been pleasantly surprised at just how good a plugin sounded for this or that, despite the fact that you have the real plate reverb and stuff like that.
Sure. Well, plate is one place that I have not found a plugin that I thought was really great.
Okay.
But many I think are great. I think that the Sound Toys Echo Boy is an awesome delay.
Mm-hmm.
I use that a lot. I think that the Waves Renaissance EQs are really useful EQs for just cutting and just sculpting. They do the job. I use those all the time, individual tracks that just, like if I'm summing my drums out onto a stereo pair and a compressed submix, there's going to be some EQing that goes on in those individual mics inside the box. And then that's going to be done with probably a Waves REQ,
Mm-hmm.
just simple. And then there's some good saturation ones. The Phoenix, the Crane Song Phoenix, very cool. Saturation plugin with some sort of cryptic names for things that I don't really understand, but you just kind of flip through them and go, oh, okay, I like that. It's like iridescent or luminescent or, all that stuff. But it sounds really cool, and it can really bring some energy and life to a track. URS saturation, which I don't know if they make that anymore, if they even still like exist.
Oh yeah, URS. I remember that was one I remember checking out a long time ago, and I never haven't come back to it.
Yeah, the Saturation 64 plugin, it has all these different, like Motown mic pre or tape 15 or 30 IPS or British mic pre. And it's cool. It just, it puts a little hair on things. It's not like a distortion box per se, but it definitely gives a little grit to things in a non-digital sounding sort of way. And I like that. So those are the ones that I use the most. Then the Massey CT5 is a really cool, just like, what's the word I'm looking for?
That's the
transparent
compressor.
Yeah. So those are kind of my regular use kind of plugins. I don't delve into, like trying 20 different EQ plugins or something like that. Right. I just kind of find one that I like and go with it.
I think part of the message there is just a reminder that you don't have to know every single plugin that's out there and compare and contrast them all. What you need tools that you feel good about, that you like the sound of, and you feel like you can get what you're trying to get out of it. And then you need to hone in your system into something that's simplified so that you can focus on getting the art of mixing right, because art benefits from limitations. If we have every option all the time, we can't get any art done.
Yes. Everything you just said is the gospel as far as I'm concerned. Like I said, I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what equipment I want, but also I don't want to be doing that too much in the process of mixing or in the process of recording. You know what I mean? I want to know what I've got going into those and not do too much comparison. A-Bing is just like, that is a slippery slope. It's very useful, and it's also the thief of joy. The thief of joy. Wow,
what a title!
Yeah, it doesn't often serve the moment well, is how I would put it. And obviously, sometimes you have to evaluate things. It's important to A/B them, but generally, I just try to say, I'm going to put this on there, and it's either going to work or it's not. And if it's not, I'll try something else. But I'm not going to get into which one of these EQs sounds cooler boosting 10K in the plugin. I can't go there. So I'm with you in that. Get your toolbox filled with tools that you know, and you know what they do, and you have purposes for them, and focus more on your own ideas and your creativity than the minutia of what gear you don't have.
So I'm watching. My daughter convinced me to pick up the Disney Channel. She wanted to watch something, and then before I cancel it, I was like, "Let's watch all the Disney or all the Star Wars movies." So we're going one by one through that, and it's really remarkable to see these films of the same storyline created across different time, different genres, different technologies, and everything. And then you go back and watch the earliest ones, like 4, 5, and 6. And you see when they came back in and they added new bits of digital animation and everything in there. And I'm really struck by how before there were these new digital tools for which to add animation or whatever into the film, the way they made those movies was so great, and yet it was so limited compared to what can be done now technologically. And that's just a real reminder to me of you don't need to compare it to all the possibilities that could possibly be there. You just need to take these tools you've got, make the most of it, and like you just said, create really, really well within that framework.
Yeah, I mean, it's the art is so much more important than any of the equipment. And knowing the equipment is great and it helps, but it should never be that first. It should always be, what am I doing right now artistically?
Well, yeah, sorry. And to just support what you're saying, when you talk about this mixing before mixing in the production process, what I love about that is it allows you to focus on the art. So it's like, let's focus on the art of the part, the art of the music and the choices that we're making musically, and the art of how you put your fingers on the strings, and the art of how you're hitting the drums to create a sound that's worth hearing coming out of the speakers later.
Right. And what you're talking about is what I think of as like the hierarchy of things as far as importance. And you kind of have to have that in your head of, what's most important and what's less important. What's most important to me in the recording phase is the sound that I am recording. That's number one. Nothing comes before that. Everything that comes after that pales in comparison as far as how much influence it's going to have on the overall, way it's perceived later. So that's the first thing. I try to get that right before I start reaching for EQ knobs and stuff like that. If something doesn't sound right, I'm not going to kid myself into thinking, oh, you're going to EQ that out later. You're going to fix that. I'm either going to fix it at the drum or the source or whatever it is, or I'm going to try to do a little EQ going in, or we're going to have to change course if that doesn't work.
Yeah. What are some things that you can tell right away when you walk out to the room and hear the instrument? And that, what comes to mind about that, and what comes to mind about, well, when you're in the room with the instrument, you don't quite know what it's going to sound like until you go listen to how it's coming through the speakers. Are there any things that pop to mind about that process?
Definitely, it's a lot easier for me to tell. Like, for example, a drum kit. If I stand in the room with a drum kit and the drummer's playing it, I can pretty much tell what all the problems are going to be coming off the speakers. I just know. I'm like, oh, this is building up in the room. That cymbal's too brash. This tom isn't tuned very well. I can hear all that stuff right away. Things that are more difficult are things like guitar amps, where you're putting a mic really close to it maybe, and it's going to just, how it comes off the speakers is really different than how it is perceived, like standing a few feet away from it in the room. Sometimes if I've recorded like a larger ensemble in a room with a lot of spot mics and some room mics, it's kind of hard to gauge how it's going to come off right away in the room. You can kind of get a sense, but it's a little more tricky. Like acoustic guitars, it's usually like, yeah, that's going to sound good, or no.
Right.
And it's usually like mostly the instrument.
Although I'm struck by how much bass there is on a mic for an acoustic guitar versus what you thought there was just out in the room, That's
definitely true. But if you put your head right down there, you just don't ever put your head where you put the acoustic guitar mic. It's sort of like you don't put your head where you put the electric guitar mic.
Yeah, well,
damage your hearing.
And a great reminder to sometimes put the mic where your ears are for an acoustic guitar and see what that sounds like. It can be a pretty remarkable guitar sound.
Yeah, especially, I found sometimes if you've got a good room and it's quiet enough, the environment, like an Omni condenser farther away than you think on an acoustic guitar can just be so good. It can just sound so balanced and natural. And that's because it's not getting all that boominess that, you get when you get in close.
Yeah. Well, we were talking with Derek Barguer of Vanguard Audio Labs recently, and he was pointing out that just the pickup patterns on the mic. So when you switch to Omni, it's not just about the low end. It's actually there's a clarity that happens in the high end, which is what you're describing too, and you really can get a balanced sound.
Yeah, I noticed that on certain mics, especially a KM86, a Neumann KM86. That mic is magical in Omni.
Yeah.
And in Figure 8 too. Both those patterns change it fairly significantly, and you got to have a good space because it's going to all of a sudden really show off whatever the room sounds a lot more.
Yeah.
But if you're in that good space, oh boy, it's so musical and natural sounding.
Yeah, so let's clarify that a little bit because so many of us might be dealing with home studios, and I'm not sure. I think we can definitely put Omni mics wherever we want in our home studios and check it out. But I think we're likely not going to have that experience of the balanced quality of the sound. We may have more of an experience of, oh, this is a cool sound when I put the mic over here.
Right. Yeah, because, again, if your room has problems, the Omni is going to accentuate those problems more.
Yeah.
But if your room sounds good, the Omni is going to accentuate that nice sound more.
Yeah, and you know what? Just in the spirit of also trying to explain, well, what's a problem? I would also suggest that in a lot of smaller home studios, the room is as big a part. It's a very big part of the instrument sound And we might not realize that at first. And the Omni is just literally going to be, you're miking the room as much as you're trying to mic the instrument. And so that's probably a way to think of it, where it's like, you're just amplifying whatever that room's doing. And it may have a character that could be cool in this production, or it could be messed up. It can also make an indie, recording sound totally authentic because you're bringing in the room and amping it up that way.
Yeah. And just also there's applications like, 3 singers are on one mic, things like that. Or, with the figure 8, sometimes it's cool because of how it rejects so hard on the sides.
Yeah.
To use those things. And I have, my place here is not a, what do you call an ideal traditional studio space. It's a small-ish place I've got 3 rooms that I can record in, but none of them are big. None of them are particularly flattering. One of them is very dead and just dead. And the other one's kind of medium size, and it has some problems that I try to mitigate as much as I can. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I am apprehensive about using Omni here because I don't really have a room that sounds good, that it can embellish. But it's nice out in the hallway though. Like if I want that real big, just natural like reverberant sound, mm-hmm. I'll put an Omni 87 out in the hall. And just whatever I'm tracking in the other space, just make another track, and then I can have like a room track, so like hand claps or tambourine, I can just put something out there, and it's kind of like this natural, unique reverb sound that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. But.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do is to take an acoustic guitar and just go play in like, if you're in an apartment building with, 15-story, 10-story stairwell. You just get that endless reverb, which is so great. And I've never really recorded in that space. But now that I'm hearing you remind me, I want to go take my little portable sound devices and just go start recording in stairwells. Do a stairwell album.
It's a cool sound.
You know what it feels like when inspiration hits and you want to capture your great song idea, but then the studio gets in the way and it's just no fun anymore. Wouldn't it feel awesome if you could simplify the process of producing your music from inspiration to final masterpiece? PreSonus Studio One is a powerful digital audio workstation that helps you compose your music with a complete collection of virtual instruments for keyboards and drums, MIDI tools for hip-hop, EDM, and film, a flexible sketchpad with chord charts and key recognition for songwriting and arranging, and classic effects pedals and amp simulators for guitar and bass. With 37 high-quality effects plugins, integrated Melodyne, and drag and drop flexibility, you can easily edit and polish your mixes. And Studio One is the only DAW with a built-in mastering studio so that you can take your record from writing to radio ready all in one place. Download your free version of Studio One Prime and get started now at PreSonus, wherever sound takes you. If you want to capture every nuance of a great performance in your studio, then you're going to need to start with a microphone that is crafted with great care and attention to detail. JZ Mics in Riga, Latvia designs amazing sounding microphones that are handcrafted with jeweler's precision to bring you incredible detail in your recordings. At the heart of JZ microphones is the unique golden drop capsule design, which uses a lighter, faster diaphragm that delivers great clarity and fidelity while avoiding distracting colorations and distortions. This is my voice right now on the new Amethyst microphone with Class A discrete amplifier circuitry, extremely low self-noise, and advanced built-in shock mount technology to bring an expensive sound to your studio for an affordable price. JZ offers a 5-year warranty, free shipping to the US, and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Plus, for a limited time, you can use the coupon code Rockstars to get 50% off the Amethyst microphone at jzmic.com. All right, cool. So back to mixing. I mean, we're always mixing. Drums, let's talk about the tight kick and snare sound and what are some things to think about as far as accomplishing that in both, the recording and the mixing stage. And then, I don't know if I'm asking 2 questions here, but there was one of the records in your playlist, your video playlist, Davey Knowles, Oxford, Mississippi, has got that great, like, splashy bottom snare effect. And I wonder if you want to talk about those two topics.
Sure. So the Davey Knowles splashy snare, that was recorded at Shirk Studios. That is the great Michael Caskey on drums, and he is amazing. And he's got this beautiful Ludwig Black Beauty snare.
Nice.
That we had most certainly tuned down very low, and probably has this thing on top of it called a big fat snare drum, which is a ring that goes on your drum and it kind of makes it sound lower and a little deader and thicker.
But it's not like is it not like a traditional O-ring that just totally stops the resonance? Is it different?
Slightly different because of the ring around the outside is not the same as what sits on the inside, and it doesn't cover the same amount of, I think it covers the whole drum.
Oh, okay, cool.
If I'm not mistaken.
Just a reminder to go, Rockstars, go to the drum store, talk to the drum store owner or whatever, and go rediscover all the amazing collection of drum treatment tools that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like one of the most important things in me getting drum sound is I have this box, and it's just full of literally all different kinds of towels and thicknesses of towels, sizes of towels, pieces of stuff that can be used for dampening in random ways. And they all are different, you know? And I'll just, when I have a drummer come in, I'll just put the box over by the drum set and be like, here, you know.
Try it out.
Just try stuff. Here's everything, you know, this is like the super thin rag that you can put on there or a really thick one. And that changes the sound a lot. And I'm sure we would have been experimenting with that on that track. And the other thing about that track is actually, since you mentioned it, the stomps and claps at the beginning of that track, that's the hallway. That's the stairwell.
Oh, cool.
That's 5 of us standing out in the stairwell with a couple mics out there, multed like 3 or 4 times to get that clapping and stomping sound at the beginning.
All right, Rockstars, reminder, Davey Knowles, Oxford, Mississippi. Go check it out in the video playlist, which is in the show notes, and you can go hear those claps.
What was the other question? I'm sorry.
Well, it was just sort of tight and kick and snare,
drums,
punchy. You know, when you're trying to get that thing that's like, you know, whatever it is. I think of references like Steely Dan on one end, and I think of like cool indie rock songs.
Gotcha.
You know, with the groove on the other end, but it's not like the big rock thing. You know,
right on the indie rock side, I feel like a lot of guys use samples, kind of in the indie, like the modern indie kind of thing that I'm thinking of.
Are we supposed to give up, or do we still try and record drums to sound like samples?
I mean, I'm not that into using samples too much. I'm not against it, but it's not something I usually do. I try to record the drums. And like when you talk about like the Steely Dan thing, I think, you know, there's definitely some EQing that goes into getting a drum kit to sound like that. It's not, you're not going to record drums flat and get that kind of clarity and separation and punch from everything, you know? So I find myself, I mean, if I were to just think kind of in broad strokes, you know, with the kick drum, I'm using a mic, usually a Lawson L47, which has a lot of low end. So I'm usually carving a little bit of low end out of the kick drum because it's a little too much. And then maybe adding a little bit of, you know, somewhere around 3 to 7K to give it a little more snap, just to taste in the arrangement, you know. Snare drum, I'm just, you know, EQing with the Pultec. That's usually it. I'll just boost some top. And then maybe in the mix, cut a little low or low mid to get it to cut better. Kind of the same thing with the toms. I'll boost a little top going in. Maybe I'll cut, you know, below like 50 hertz. And then usually I'm getting rid of some low mids there too in the mix. And the kit mic's kind of the same thing. It's just like it's kind of smiley facing everything, you know, with the sort of scoopy. And I know kind of like now my room has these, you know, 700 to 900 hertz things that kind of happen when the drums get really loud that I kind of have to contend with. So I'm doing a lot of cutting, basically.
We're sort of removing resonant frequencies.
Yes. And then so I'll take that and then that'll get bussed out of the DAW and onto the console. And then I'll go through usually a pair of parametric EQs with the entire drum bus. And then I'll do more tweaking with that. That's usually more broad strokes. That's usually like I'm boosting some top or I'm, you know, boosting a little bottom, or sometimes I'll cut some more stuff if it's necessary. But I've got this pair of Rupert Neve designed EQs that are these 5-band sort of really cool. They're just really flexible and surgical.
Nice.
I've been using those on the drums for quite a while now and really liking them.
Okay, so it's a lot of little treatments adding up. And then what about the parallel kick snare crush thing? Is that, did you just include that in there, or do we need to make another comment about that?
Yeah, that's, I do that a lot. Sometimes I'm like literally distorting it and, like blowing something up with it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'm using it like if I was doing more of like, the Steely Dan thing or whatever, the slicker kind of a sound. That would be more, not that. That would be more of just like where I would use it to get a little snap out of the kick and snare. So I would bust the kick and snare separately to another track through a compressor and an EQ, smack it up a little bit, and then usually have to use the EQ to get rid of some of the artifacts of the compressor that are bothersome.
Yeah.
And then usually that track, that fader, like I'm looking at my console right now, and that fader is at like minus 12. So it's not a lot of it. You know what I mean? It's a little tiny bit of it. But if I mute it, you hear it go away. You feel it.
Yeah, I've noticed that sometimes the kick and snare parallel thing is just that thing that, like, you've got your drums, they're sitting with the song in the mix, and they sound pretty good, but you start adding that, and all of a sudden you just get that little extra bit of kick and snare snap, and it makes them cut through the track just a little bit more.
Yeah, and it lets them cut through. A lot of times you'll have a track where maybe in the verse, the drums really cut because it's a little more sparse. Well, then the chorus kicks in and the drums kind of get like, lost. But the parallel compressed thing really helps the drums sort of stay. And when the band grows, they still have their presence. The kick and snare can still get through.
Yeah, and I feel like I've heard Andrew Sheps describe the kick and snare bus as the compression sort of glues the groove of the kick and snare bouncing back and forth together somehow.
Definitely. And that's a good thing to talk about, actually, because that is one thing that I do a lot of with compression and drums is I alter and or accentuate the groove. And I don't think a lot of people think about it like that. But I think it's important to think about it like that because you can really change the feel of a drum beat with a compressor.
Yeah.
For the better or for the worse. But if there are things that you want to bring out in the drums, there's ways to use attack and release and amounts of compression to do that. And I do that a lot. If I really want to bring out compression is really good at bringing out parts of especially like hi-hat grooves and stuff like that, or sucking in cymbals if you need to. You can make the release longer and not let those cymbals be so explosive and tighten everything up, shorten everything up, and focus things a little more. So I'm always trying to get the most out of like that. What do I want this to be? Do I want this to be more explosive and gushy? And if I'm going to do that, then I'm probably going to do a parallel compression with a really fast release. Whereas if I want it to be more tight and kind of like that, like indie tight or Steely Dan tight, that's going to be probably slower release on the compressor so that you don't hear it pumping so much where it's just kind of there, and it doesn't move a lot dynamically.
So I just recently rediscovered Portishead Dummy, and that record just sounds so amazing. And that was one of my first introductions to compression and the use of it. And, it's a lot of loops and things in there too, although they did an amazing job of recreating that later as a live band. But the process of using compression as a rhythmic and an expressive tool in a mix is really taken to the extreme with that stuff, where it's like, you hear the cymbals go away with the kick and then slowly work their way back in across an entire bar and then go away again,
Yeah. Well, they have all those like really slow tempos too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because that's the other thing that I always think about. It's like the tempo of the song is going to really have a great impact on how I set up my compression, because what you just described, it's like, it's going to react to that tempo. The compressors are reacting to the tempo of the song. And so, do you want to make it feel more shaky and more urgent, or do you want to make it feel more kind of glued and, and the release knob is kind of the control of that in a way.
Yeah. So a couple of other artists that I made notes of about the drums. Marquis Hill was one that I'm not sure how to describe it. It's kind of like, it's almost like EDM jazz or something like that.
Yeah,
Pretty cool.
Marquise. Yeah.
What's the story with that?
Marquise is a guy that I met many years ago. I made one of his first albums with him. He's a great trumpet player. He won the Thelonious Monk Award, and then he got signed to Concord Music. We did a record with them, and now he does his own thing. He also tours with Marcus Miller, the bass player.
Oh, cool.
He's in his band. So Marquise is a super creative guy, lives in New York, and he's just always making records. That record is kind of like a beat record kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That is, the drummer on that is really great. His name is Micaiah McCraven. He's a really great drummer who's he's getting a lot of notoriety these days.
Yeah. You got a good memory for names too.
Well, I've worked with all these guys a lot,
Yeah.
So I mean, I've done like 4 or 5 records with Marquise, and that tune is just like this kind of pulsing beat. Yeah, like groove beat. Just I like the way that the drums and bass came off on that track a lot.
Well, it has a loop quality. It sounds almost like samples off a record.
That's a through performance. It's not edited at all. That bass and drum performance is just a take. That was also cut at Shirk's.
Yeah. So what do we want to know about that? Because there's a lot of times where I'm like recording a band, but I'm like, man, I just really want it to sound like it was samples.
Yeah.
What lessons did you learn about getting those drums and bass to glue together? Same stuff we've already talked about, or any additional thoughts?
A lot of the same principles are from the technical side, but kind of again working with the players to get them. Well, here's a big thing: the players have to hear it right in their headphones to glue it together themselves, right? So it's really important to have a nice, compelling sound in the cans. And
that includes the parallel drum compression sometimes?
Sometimes if I'm printing that, and I do record that a lot of times. I can't remember if I did on that track or not, but I do oftentimes, I'll just use an aux send on the console and maybe send the kick and snare to a compressor and just print that back in. But that track definitely has a lot. I think I was using like some parallel distortion on the kick and snare on that track actually through like a Neve module. Like one thing I'll do is I'll take that same sort of drum parallel bus and I'll run it through one of the Neve modules, but I'll plug it into the microphone input instead of the line input and just, turn it up, and it just sounds like sampley. It gives it this sample quality all of a sudden because it distorts and compresses so much that there's really not much variance between any of the hits in it. And it gives it this sort of like weird distorted sample-like thing. And I'm pretty sure that track has a fair amount of that on the kick and snare. And I remember the bass, trying to really get the bass to have some like gnarliness in that track.
Yeah.
Was important.
And that's fun to do. And it's a good reminder that these are some of the reasons why having a console or something like the API, the box, allows you to do this real-time treatment in the recording stage that can be a whole lot trickier if you're trying to do it. I mean, some things you just can't do if you're doing it all in the box, or you can get close to it, but like you can do crazy parallel compressions in the box, but you need to know that what you're hearing when you record it is going to sound slightly different from what you hear when you play it back because the latency of what's the parallel processing is going to shift between the two.
And essentially, I know that there are systems where it compensates for hardware inserts and stuff like that. I don't have the HD style rig, so I don't have that.
Yeah, but I don't think it does that in real time. I think it does that on playback.
Right, not in record. Correct.
Yeah,
couldn't do that in real time, I don't think. Yeah. But anyway, so it is nice to have the console because it just, you don't have to have a huge thing. You just have to have a little thing that lets you do some routing that you just can't do in the digital domain easily. So I like it for that.
Yeah, and typically we're talking about drums is one of the ones where you...
Yeah, 90% of the time, if I want to do something like that, it's drums. It's, sometimes it's delay too, though. It's nice to just be able to just like, okay, I'm going to put this through the tape echo too, and then print that on another track,
Yeah.
And then I can just, so I can just have it up on the console and just send to the tape echo from one of the aux sends and then print that on another track. And it's just, it's quick and easy. I mean, you can do the same thing with the computer, but having it just on a button the whole time in the mix. Oh, I want this to go to the delay right there. Like, it's just so nice when it's right in front of you. I'm all about like not having to think as much as possible when I'm mixing about that kind of how to get things from A to B. I want that to
totally
be sort of natural.
But I will say that anything that's time related effects, those are the ones you can get away with as far as treating, even if you route it back out from the computer
Correct.
to something.
The latency is not a problem.
Because the delay and the reverb will be things that happen after the real. You're not going to get a phasing between two things.
Correct. Yes.
Although, a reminder, you will get a slightly different delay time or a slightly different pre-delay. If
you're pre-delaying whatever you're doing by it, but it's it's an imperceptible thing to my ears.
During the height of record making, Tom Dowd, Muscle Shoals, Stax Studios, Ardent Studios, and the New York City record plant all turned to one company to build their consoles. That company is now Spectra 1964, carried on today through Bill Cheney and Jim Romney. The extremely stable, high-speed circuit design of the 101 amplifier provides unequaled headroom, low noise, and linear output irrespective of transient audio peaks, giving you cleaner, punchier, dynamic recordings. Spectra 1964 brings you the sound of ZZ Top, Aerosmith, Bruce Springsteen, King Crimson, John Lennon, and so many more. Created by the missile engineers who were central in rolling out the systems that protected the free world for over half a century, Spectra 1964 literally brings rocket science to your studio. With the STX 600 mic pre with built-in complementer, full-frequency passive BBDI, and C610 dedicated complementer, start making records that last a lifetime at Spectra1964.com. And then another band, Storm Jameson, has got a great indie rock quality to it. It's very precise drums, but they're not trying to be super hi-fi and, big, wide, giant stereo. They're like just right in the track. And I also noticed there was a very precise hi-hat quality to it. Do you have any thoughts about that record? Was that just samples, or was that something, again, where smart moves is what caused the drums to sound like that?
I like that you don't know. That makes me very happy.
Yeah.
So that record, this is actually a great album to talk about on this podcast. That record was all recorded with a 2-channel universal audio interface in their own little home studio.
Awesome.
So two tracks at a time was the most that they could record at any time on that. The drums were done with 2 mics, and I think the hi-hat is actually an overdub of a drum pad hi-hat. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like it's a sample, but they're playing it with a drum, hitting the drum pad.
Correct.
And that I love that topic because that's a very cool reminder of how you can sometimes do use a sampled sound, but you can perform it as a human performance if you want to.
Yes. And that's what that is. And so that album, I didn't have anything to do with the recording of that album. I mixed it and I mastered it in a very short period of time. I would say, I think we spent 3 days mixing the whole album because they did not have a big budget. But they knew that they had some good performances with some vibe, but it didn't sound very good. And, it was pretty lo-fi when I got it. And I definitely upped the hi-fi-ness of it, but also kind of liked some of the lo-fi element of the way it sounded. And I thought it was part of the charm, and I didn't want to distill too much of that out of it. So it has its own character. I really love the energy of it in that it just feels so authentic to me. And it feels like, those guys are like 30 years old, and it's like, I feel like I'm listening to like 2 55-year-old like veterans. It's such an interesting thing to hear it. I played it for one of my friends, and he's just like, these guys sound like grizzled old men. I was like, yeah, they're both about 30.
That's funny.
Yeah. So that record was fun to mix. It was pretty challenging because that record had some just like problems, like phase, like guitar and voice that was recorded together that was out of phase kind of stuff. Just things that were just, they're not engineers and they don't have nice gear. But at the end of the day, we were able to come up with something that, I think is pretty compelling enough to share it with you and anybody else I know. So it just goes to show that if you have good ideas and you take some time and get the ideas from a performance standpoint really good, if you're not happy with the sound, there's people who can make it better. You know? And you don't have to do it all, but it's nice to know that you can be empowered in that part of it, and you can save a lot of money. And if you just learn a little bit about recording, you know, and so that's what they did. And I think they made a really cool album with it. You know?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's, you didn't have to take it from lo-fi to hi-fi where their fan base all of a sudden goes, oh man, you guys sold out with your sound. We loved your whole thing. You took it to just right fi.
Yeah, I just tried to take it to gets me off fi. You know, that's sort of always my approach.
Take it to my fi.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Groovy. And another record, Matt Ullery, The Remnant of Everything, big orchestral thing where you're like, dude, like, where are you? So tell us about that project. It's beautiful. And then what lessons can you share with us about mixing horns, orchestral arrangements, strings? You know, how did that even get created?
Yeah, that one's so I'm trying to remember. We've done so many. I've done 10 albums with Matt now, and they all kind of start to blend together. That one, I want to say, was the original recording would have been piano and bass. I think that's it, to a click track.
So you potentially stacked that.
So we went to a studio that had a really nice Steinway piano here in Chicago and recorded the piano and the bass together to a click track. And then everything else that you hear was added later. I believe. So we would do like sections. There would be like brass, woodwinds. Then there's a singer that came in and sang on it. There's percussion that was overdubbed. But most of that stuff, you know, he's a genius in coming up with the arrangement, and then we kind of piece it together one thing at a time. And then so my challenge is to make that feel cohesive and make it not sound like a bunch of things recorded, you know, one or two at a time, and make it sound like this is all in the same space together, because it's got this grandiose kind of classical jazz. I call it chamber jazz is what I call it.
Nice. I like that. It totally sounds like it was all just performed in a big hall, you know?
Yeah. So that was all recorded. I think I even took my preamps to the other studio. That was all recorded with API stuff. And that stuff would have been I would not have committed to I wouldn't have EQ'd a lot on that stuff. That would have been much more just like, you know, pristine recording going for that.
Because the arrangement choice, the instrument choice, the distance from the mic, those would be the things that, and the dynamic of the performance would be the things that are mixing it, each overdub into the final result.
Correct. And it's much more about balancing the different instruments within the harmonic structure than it is about necessarily getting into carving things out so much. You know?
Yeah. Like
maybe I would cut a little low end and stuff here and there, but not nearly as much as I would on like a dense rock record or something like that.
I feel like in my experience, when I've tried to do anything that this reminds me of, not really the same sound, but like I'm trying to add an overdub to something that already sounds blended together. You know, it's like it's a orchestral arrangement of something, and I'm trying to add another overdub to it. I find myself making decisions of like, get further from the mic. Oh yeah, like play it a little differently.
Totally.
Those are where the decisions come from, because if it sticks out of the mix of the other things, then it's just simply not right in the recording stage.
Yes, that's it. And so that recording, I mean, there's definitely EQ and reverb and compression and stuff on there, but it's much more light-handed on the mix, I'd say. You know, and mostly the thing that I did with that in the mix is the reverb, you know, because that's the space, because all that stuff was recorded in small space.
Wow.
and I wanted to make it sound not like that. I wanted to make it sound like it was recorded in Symphony Center or something like that, you know? So I wanted it to kind of, in my head, I had this idea of like it sounding like an old sort of Sinatra recording from like the 60s, where he would be singing with the orchestra, kind of like it was a pretty good year or something like that. You know, I wanted it, not that I wanted it to come off like that, but I wanted it to have that sort of mysterious, echoey quality that track has, you know, that just like, what is that space?
So you probably need to hear the reverb while you're adding all these instruments to make sure that it's getting close, or are you able to
Yeah.
record this without any of the effects yet?
No, I would have been monitoring. I mean, because when we were doing all the overdubs here, the brass and the strings and all that, I would have been monitoring the reverb.
And would that be the plate? Would the EMT be the perfect thing for that?
Yeah, that's what I think on that. I used the plate, probably a little bit of spring reverb too on the like percussion and the vocals. And maybe I would have had some kind of a chamber plug-in going too. Sometimes I'll, it just depends. I can't remember. That was a while ago, but I have like what's it called? Shoot. It's that reverb that everybody loves.
Lexicon or something like that?
No, it's the Altiverb. Jeez, I can't
Altiverb, right.
Altiverb, yeah. And so Altiverb has some decent sounding chamber presets in it. And I use those a little bit sometimes too.
I hear Altiverb getting a lot of references, and sometimes, so it's an impulse response reverb. And sometimes I wonder if it's because I'm not sure, is it still on the scene as a plugin company, or is it something that everybody got a long time ago and they've just really gotten good at using it? And so therefore I hear a lot of great mixers talking about using it. I just don't have it myself.
I don't know. I've had it. I got it, 7 or 8 years ago or something like that, maybe. Yeah. And I don't use it all the time, but when I need it, it's cool. It's definitely usable. It doesn't sound as vibey and cool, and it doesn't sit in the track as well as my plate or or even my spring, but it does nice spaces. It has these nice kind of like room sounds that you can use. Sometimes it's cool on drums too. If you've got like a kit that's got no room mic or something and you want it to have that roominess, there's some like room settings in there that you can bust your drums through, and it's kind of cool for that.
Dig it. What about your Pro Tools? You're using Pro Tools, right? And if you are, is being current at the latest version the most important thing for you? Or have you found that having an older version is like you've got everything just in balance and that's what works?
I try to stay kind of like one step behind what the most current thing is, just so that any of the problems get worked out before I get it. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I don't know, Pro Tools 2019 probably came out in 2019, I'm assuming. I just recently upgraded to 2019. I had it for, I have the just subscription thing where I get the updates every year.
Right.
And I had downloaded it and I was like, I'm kind of in the middle of a bunch of stuff. I can't really afford for things to get weird right now. I'm just going to hold steady. And then I got to a little break where I had a few days where I thought, well, if I install this and it's not working, I've got time to figure it out or without interrupting anybody's sessions. And I did it and it was fine. And so I'm always just trying to just be like right behind, not quite on the cutting edge, but I don't want to fall way behind. And honestly, my experience with Pro Tools has been, they have fixed things and gotten things better over time. Like the 2019 has a really cool feature that you can switch I/O without it interrupting playback at all, which is really nice. Because if you're playing back and you want to throw a bus on something, before it would put a little hitch in the audio, Now they fixed that in 2019. So it doesn't do that anymore. You can literally change the inputs and outputs or buses and you don't hear it change.
Oh, that's cool.
Or you can also export a file while you're playing back and it'll export it and not interrupt playback. So I've found that Avid has over time, slowly made it work a little better and more efficiently and fixed little things and added things that are good. So I kind of keep up, unless like this one, I read some bad things at the beginning, so I was a little afraid. But then they worked it out and then it was fine. And so,
yeah, it's just good advice. Like you don't have to do, you can, it's cool to be a little slightly behind the curve. I certainly hear a lot of pros saying that because one of the things is that if you're working professionally doing stuff, you've got, you got a lot on the line with your studio being something you can rely on. And so therefore making the smart choice and moving ahead sort of carefully when you make changes it seems to be the thing that allows you to always be reliable for your clients and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely wait till you've got a little gap.
A little window, yeah.
A little window, because you just never know. Something might be weird and you don't want to have to tell a client like, oh, we can't work today because my Pro Tools doesn't work. Like that's just that's just not cool, especially when you had something that was already working.
That's all they know. They don't, it's
That's
like
all
compression.
they care about.
They're going to be like, well, dude, what are you talking about? Like, this was fine yesterday. Why is today not fine?
Exactly.
And then, I think another reminder is that you want enough time to do the new installs and to try stuff out. And then just that extra buffer that says, okay, what if this goes south? How much time do I need to recover before my next session? And maybe that's the good window for you,
Yeah, and I always keep the old installs of Pro Tools, because when I do the new one, if I had to, I could always just uninstall it and put the old one back on, and get going again.
Right.
That's important too. Don't just like trash all your old, stuff, because you never know when you might need that just quick install to make something work,
And here's a little trick that works for me sometimes. If I'm going to do an upgrade of Pro Tools, for example, I can go find the one that's already installed in my applications folder, just change the name of it slightly, just put old at the end of the name, and then install the new one. And then, sometimes something in the background might be changing with the software, but I feel like for most part recently, they're all using a lot of similar, like they can use similar components internally, whatever those extra little extensions are and stuff. And you can actually just have two on there to make sure that you get past that first upgrade.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. That's a good idea though.
Yeah. Or you can just keep the old install and then just reinstall that,
Yeah. Luckily I've never had to do that, but I've thought like, oh God, that could be really bad.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we don't need to go too deep down that, but that's good reminder and good advice for how to stay current and move forward in the smart way. Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Rockstars of Drums will show you how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Want to start mastering your own records? Rockstars of Mastering walks you through exactly how I mastered my own record using nothing but plugins in PreSonus Studio One. Want to learn how to create a mix that doesn't suck but rocks instead? At Mixmaster Bundle, I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins so that you can have punchy, powerful drums, guitars that rock, bass you can feel, and a mix that is in your face. Plus, it's totally free as my way of saying thanks for listening. Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now and look for the clickable link in the show notes below. Before we sort of close out here, let me ask you about your stereo bus, stuff that happens once you've summed this mix together. What might you go through? What are some smart things to do, whether you're using API the box or whether you're actually mixing in the box in Pro Tools?
So I'm a pretty big proponent of just being able to hear what's going on with the stereo bus compression the whole time, So I've kind of settled on what I do is I have, sometimes I use the compressor that's built into the box. It's just tapping it.
What is it? It's a pair of...
It's like a pair of 527s.
527s, right?
Yeah. They're cool. I had a Smart C1 and that I was using, and then one day I was like, let me A/B this compressor that's in the console on the stereo bus with it. I hadn't really gotten into using it, and I was shockingly thought, wow, I like that better. It's just a nicer sounding line amp.
That's great.
So I started using that, and then that goes into the tape machine if I'm mixing to tape. And if I'm not mixing to tape, then it just goes into the Varimu, the Manley Varimu. And that's usually the chain. And I don't compress the mix a lot.
So it's double compression.
It's usually a slight tap on two compressors.
Okay, cool.
Not always, but that's kind of the gen. And sometimes like the API compressor, it might not even be doing anything. You know what I mean? Like it's on, maybe it catches a peak here or there when something gets really loud, but it's not doing a lot. You're not hearing any of that.
Yeah,
compression.
And a reminder is that there's not an answer for all mixes. There's an answer for here's some good places to start with each mix.
Totally. Yeah. So that's, I sometimes I'll put EQs on the mix bus, and I've really been trying to not do that because a lot of reasons. It just kind of complicates things. And I just find that if I get the balance and EQ right with the tracks, I just shouldn't need that EQ one. And then if I need to in the mastering, I can give it a little goose,
Yeah. All right, dig it. Then let's go to a couple of closing questions here before we bid you adieu. What do you feel like? And some of these I asked you on the last one, but I'll spin these around mixing and any other new tools that you're using. When you started out in mixing, what do you think was one of the things that was holding you back?
Just my own understanding and knowledge, and my own lack of confidence, mostly. Equipment to a certain extent. Monitoring, I think, was probably the first big challenge I had to get over. Getting a decent set of just where you're just hearing things as they are.
And will you remind us again what your monitors are?
My monitors right now are SE Eggs, and then I have a pair of Oratones, and I use Shure SRH940s for headphones once in a while.
Dig it.
Yeah. So, I really want to get a pair of those ATC SCM25s. I heard those, and oh god,
are those the big ones?
Yeah, they're the medium-sized ones. So I think the 50s are the big ones. The 25s are a little bit smaller, but they're decent size. But they're just so clear and true. And I would love to have those. But I'm really used to the Eggs, too. I'm also just petrified to change monitors because I've been using these for like 10 years now. And it just seems like, oh, God,
I know.
Such a home base.
I've been using my NS10s with the subwoofer for a decade in here, too. And I've got them positioned right. And I just blew out one of my cones. And now I'm like, should I get new cones and replace them? Or should I put up these KRKs, these bigger ones, and just try those out for a while? I'm like you, I'm excited about getting into new monitors and petrified at the same time.
It's a really scary proposition because everything filters through them. Like you're filtered. It's not like if you buy a mic or a mic preamp or something and then you just decide, oh, this isn't really working. Well, you can just set that aside and work around it, right? You cannot work around your speakers. They are constantly in the workflow. Yeah. So it's one of the most important things. And certainly early on, I didn't understand what good speakers were or know how to, treat a room or all those things that go into accurate monitoring.
Yeah, and positioning them is such an important thing. So like, if you happen to be good, I know there are some people that are very confident about just like setting up two NS10s, spaced a tiny bit apart from each other and get going. I'm jealous of them because I would love to be able to just not have to think so hard about positioning the speakers. But I'm still a believer in getting the imaging right and all that.
Yeah, I mean it's the equilateral triangle, right? Like that's what you're going for, basically. Yeah.
And I added a new challenge to myself because I put up a standing desk. So now I've got to figure out
good for you.
Speakers higher up.
Yeah, I really need to do that. I sit too much. People don't sit so much. That's another thing about in the box that can be challenging is if you have to sit unless you have a standing desk.
Yeah.
And so if you're sitting there in front of that computer hunched over all day, that is not good for you.
Although I will encourage you to get MacBook Air is what I'm using. Very light laptop, put it in screen share mode, and then I'll just walk around. I'll go to the back of the room or go to different spots, and I'll just make the adjustment right there just using the screen share mode.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, and then you get your butt out of the chair and move around a little bit more.
It's very important.
You can go to the hallway and make changes. You can go.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Listening from like the other room can sometimes really educate you about certain things about your mix.
Yeah.
I know it sounds crazy, but it'll tell you like, is this audible from far away? Can I understand? Can I hear the vocal out there? What do I hear more of out there? I mean, that's not like the be all end all, but it can sometimes lead you to fixing some things that might be problems.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got a spot in the bathroom of all places where you just like, there's a huge amplification of subs.
I have the same thing in front of my kitchen sink.
Yeah, and I'll just go over there and I'll be like, oh, there's some weird thing. And then I don't always know what to do with it. But if one instrument just seems to stand way out, then at least I'm like, okay, do I think that one instrument is okay to stand out, or should I maybe address it somehow? Cool. Oh, and then I guess another thing about doing that remote thing is when you go to those other spots, you could also run a tone generator and sweep the tones through, and you could find out which frequency it is that you're hearing. And I do that in the car sometimes too now to educate myself, and it's always amazing. Like what you don't hear in the car, which frequencies you don't hear and which ones sound like huge bass to you, but they might not be the same frequencies you thought, you know?
Cars are weird.
The cars are weird, but they're so awesome because they get you from point A to point B.
I just mean the listening part in the car.
How about some the best advice you received around mixing?
I think the best advice that I ever got about mixing was to just, do it without fear of making mistakes.
Nice.
Because there's really not, you have to make a lot of mistakes to get a good mix. So just embrace that and just go for it and try things that seem completely ridiculous, and I'm not saying like do that all day, but do that to a point where it leads you to be more adventurous. Because I think that most of the limitations that anybody has at this point with the way that how powerful a computer is, even if that's all you have a huge toolbox. You have a toolbox that far exceeds what most engineers throughout history have had. And the real limitation is your own ability to, tap into your creativity.
Yeah.
So, to me, that's key.
I think that's super smart. That's super smart. I mean, you talked about Chad Blake kind of teaching you that as well.
Absolutely. He's the first guy that comes to mind. And I've seen some interviews with him, and he's just so, he's very matter of fact about like, a lot of things I do sound like shit, but those don't end up in the mix. Those are just me trying to find the thing that's going to end up in the mix.
Yeah.
And what makes him a genius is the decisions that he makes on what is shit and what makes the mix. That's the genius. That's the real art of mixing.
Yeah. And luckily you answered some of that for us earlier on the podcast too.
Well, I'm glad I could do that.
Yeah. And then just one last thought about that is the encouragement to remember that your monitors and what you're hearing, that's why it's so critical, because you need to be able to be aware of all these different changes you're making. And two is Rockstars, you don't need 50 million more tools to do to try stuff and get your recording and your mix right. You need to explore the tools you've got and discover that there are 50 million other ways you could turn the knobs and adjust things. And that's why you can create so many variations of a mix and a sound. And, like you're saying, just get to that point where you find the best ones and share those with the world.
Yeah, I think we all get kind of barraged with, marketing of equipment, and I'm not one to talk about having too much equipment, right. But at the same time, the point is that most of the things that the tools, they kind of all do the same stuff. They have different colors, but most of your tools do more than you think they do, and they do more than you know that they do, and you should explore that and get into that and figure out and do. That's again where it's like push it. Like one of the things I do when I first get a piece of equipment, I turn it up all the way.
Yeah.
I just want to know, what does it do when I turn it up all the way? Let's just see. Okay, nobody got hurt.
Why wait 15 years to try that for the first time?
First thing, signal going through it. Let's see how it reacts to too much.
Yeah.
And that's just sort of my general philosophy on mixing is like, try things all the way. Try things really extreme, and then let your mind decide whether or not that works or not.
Yeah. And now another good reminder about that is once you start using that piece of gear in the middle of a sort of a critical client thing, you're going to be less and less likely to use it to extremes because now you're all of a sudden, it's like, well, we're already got this far. I don't want to mess it up. So why not do the extreme thing at the very beginning of a process, like you said, right when you get it? And then that probably applies to the mix too, which is like at the beginning of a mix, maybe try some of these extreme things to explore and discover, because maybe you're less inclined to be that bold once you're at that point where it's like, we're almost there,
Yeah, well, the further into the mix you get too, the harder it is to make an extreme thing fit.
Yeah.
Because you've already filled the spectrum up more. The extreme things I tend to try to get in there earlier because they're going to really take up space. They're really going to have a lot of character. And it's hard to insert something with that much character the further you get to the end of the mix.
Right, because then you step all over the thing you just worked so hard on.
Exactly.
Dig it. Well, awesome, dude. Let me cut to the last question here. Again, it's the hypothetical one. We're going to go back in the way back mixing machine. you go back and find yourself when you were first mixing to now. If you could go back and give yourself one bit of advice, what would it be about, how to be a rock star of the recording studio with your mixes?
Oh, man. I would say I would tell myself to try to not obsess over things so much because I think that was a mistake that I made early on was I would get overly obsessed with minutia and it would cloud my vision of the bigger picture, which was the important thing. And now I think with just time and repetition and experience, I've been able to hone my sort of what the lens I look through is. And it's much more wide now. Mm-hmm. It's much more when I first hear something, the things that I think about are much more macro. Whereas I think a lot of people, when they start out, you're like, oh, I got to get this one little thing to sound right. And like what I've learned is getting that one little thing to sound right is kind of meaningless unless the context is there. And so to just try to look things through a wider angle, try to know right at the beginning of a mix what my idea of how it should sound is. Having that clear idea of how something should sound is so important. A lot of people just get into stuff, and I used to do this too, and just start, throwing plugins on, throwing things, and it's like, what am I doing? Why did I just put that on? Because I could, and that is not a good reason to do it, And so I think I would say, hey, try to look at the big picture more. Try to think big. Don't sweat all those little details. And yeah, that's it.
Well, and, a reminder, I guess, is, if you get the perfect snare on a song, because you spent so much time focused on that, and then you still, like the 10 other things in that suck, you're still going to hate the mix later anyway.
Yeah,
so.
a song with a great snare drum sound where the vocal is lame is terrible.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's all about context.
But you get to take a song with a great vocal on it and a lame snare drum, and guess what? You can get away with that.
Hit record.
Hit record. Awesome. And then Rockstars, go check out Anthony's tracks, and you will see a great example across the board of how he respects all these different genres of music and looks for, the thing that works for that project. And you can tell right away that you don't have a collection of stuff that all sounds the same no matter what the genre is. You've got a collection of work that really reflects a respect for each genre, which is awesome.
Oh, I really appreciate that, Lidge. That's nice of you to say.
Yeah, thank you, man. Well, thanks for being on the show with us again, dude. Really a great hang. It was super fun to do the Mix Clinic with you in 2019. I'm looking forward to doing more of them. Let the Rockstars know where they should go, learn more about you, and check things out. Check out your work.
Sure. So my website is anthonygravino.com. And I'm on Instagram, Anthony Gravino. And there are some other things on the internet, some videos and stuff. I think Lidge is going to post some links to some videos of stuff I've done. And that's my contact. If you have any questions, there's contact information. I love to talk to people about recording and music. And this kind of podcast is so easy for me. Like the time, I think 2 hours, gosh, that's so long. And then it just flies by just talking to you. So yeah, it's a testament to how good of an interview you are.
Oh, thanks, dude. And guess what we would have been doing for 2 hours anyway, talking with our friends about making records.
Exactly.
So awesome, dude. And then links are right in the show notes, Rockstar. So you can just scroll right down and find all these links and hit it with your finger and click right over. Anthony, thanks, dude. I look forward to seeing you again soon, man.
Always a pleasure, Luke. Thank you.
All right, man. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who helped make this episode possible. OWC, Whisper Room, Spectra 1964, PreSonus Studio One, Jay-Z Microphones, United Plugins bringing you Hyperspace, Royal Compressor, Fire Cobra, and Front DAW, and Audio Movers, helping stream high-quality audio directly from your studio. You will find links to all these wonderful sponsors in our show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. So thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.